Hi there. Welcome to the Handy Randy Show. With me, a very important friend, not only to me, but to our community, Captain Ernie Stadvec. Welcome to the show again, Ernie.
Randy, it's a pleasure to be here because I'm sitting next to a legend in television.
In my own mind.
No, you're look, after you've been in television for 80 years, you got to be a legend, right?
Well, it seems like it.
Okay.
I'm sure a lot of people out there feel like it's 80 years or
Right.
800 years.
I've got a little story about Randy just to prove, how well known you've been over the years. Okay, I heard this second, third, or fourth hand, but the Pope is having an audience, and he's got thousands of people in St. Peter's Square, and Randy shows up with the Pope on the balcony, and one of the tourists asked one of the Italian fellows there, who's that guy up there? And the Italian says, I don't know who's the guy in the white robe, but the guy in the suit is a Randy. There, see, now that proves it right there. So I rest my case.
I forgot all about that.
Did you really?
Thanks, Ernie. Ernie's one of our favorite people from our community, and the reason for that is fewer and fewer of our greatest generation, our World War II veterans, are with us. And I'm sure that through the years, you've lost many, many friends.
Thanks for bringing that up.
It's important, though.
It seems like every organization I go to at dinner, I'm the last guy standing. But now you know Randy Norris. Okay, R.C. Norris, every time he sees me, says, that's my competition. I says, what do you mean, Randy? I have to go through this routine with him. He says, well, you and I are the last two guys from World War II. And I said, Randy, are you thinking of shooting me?
Oh, no.
I said, I hope you're not carrying heat, So he wants to be the last guy, so I'm in danger.
You had a little bit of an advantage over a lot of our World War II veterans because you got in pretty early.
Yes, I did. 16 years old, 1942.
So
I lied about my age. Boy, I sure did. I lied about my age.
But what a storied history, and we're not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about your career at the University of Akron and being a great athlete and the many things. We're going to talk about aviation today. And I know the title of the show is Handy Randy and Auto Care and all that, but if you have watched this show at all, I deviate from that from time to time. Sometimes I do some travel journals. Sometimes I talk about trains, okay? Locomotives, that's always great stuff. If it's got an engine, if it's got a wheel, then I think we should talk about it.
Well, wonderful. Yeah, I'm glad you picked aviation. That's kind of my favorite subject.
I thought it might be. And again, the nickname Captain Ernie is deserved. Tell us about that.
Well, of course, I'd flown with the airlines only as a co-pilot, got laid off, started my own outfit, then Shawnee Airways, and at that time, one of the first commuter airlines in Ohio, and I was flying between Akron and Cleveland and Detroit for the rubber companies, and then when the rubber companies started to move out, that kind of fell off. But then I had a small airline also flying out of Youngstown, and we hauled only freight for Packard Electric, General Motors. Battery cables, ignition harnesses up into the assembly plants every night, sometimes 10, 20 flights. I never worked so hard in all my life.
Now that was a mostly twin-engine Beechcraft?
Yes, twin-engine Beechcraft. I had an old Lockheed built in 1935, 2 serial numbers away from Amelia Earhart's.
Oh, wow.
And I sold it in 1972 for $3,500 because I couldn't buy any more parts. But I flew the airplane for years and years. Wonderful airplane. Big twin-engine airplane. And I was looking at a trader plane here about a year or 2 years ago, which is the Bible in the aviation business, buying and selling. And there's a last Lockheed 12A flying in the world, Lockheed Electra 12A. And I took a magnifying glass to look at the tail number, 4278. I'll never forget it. My old airplane. And I was afraid to look at the price the guy was asking. $1.5 million. One of the last ones flying in the world. So.
Wonderful story.
But my timing is beautiful. I got $3,500 for it, and the guy's selling it for $1.5 million.
You buy low, sell high.
Yeah, I got to keep on that, you know.
The B-29, you were honored enough to be part of that with our heroes you were stationed in Tinian Island.
Tinian Island, yeah.
Which there were several islands there that the B-29s flew out of, correct?
Yeah, at Guam, Saipan, and Tinian. And then they started, the first B-29 outfit was in India, and they're supposed to bomb Japan out of India. But then the Japanese overran the island, and we were supposed to go to China. But they overran those airports, so everybody came to Tinian. So we were the second or third outfit overseas. I was in the 73rd Wing, and then in operational training, you guys got hurt and had to spend 3 weeks in the hospital. My unit went over the 73rd Wing. Then I was put back in the 313th Bomb Wing. And then later, the one from India, the 43rd Wing, came over to Tinian also. And then the other outfits, the 314th, 315th, they went to Saipan and then Guam later.
Now, these were established in there even before EWO? Before we took
yeah, quite a while. Yeah, EWO was captured for a refueling stop and a damaged airplane stop.
And, of course, the P-51s were stationed out of EWO.
Yeah, later on they came when they finally perfected drop tanks.
I got you.
And they're able to do it. But we had some P-51s on the island at Tinian also, waiting to stage up there. When we landed on Tinian Island, the airplane commander, Major Dendy, and this guy was a maverick from Texas, you know, and he just liked to do everything anti-military.
Oh, didn't go by the book, huh?
Didn't go by the book, but what a wonderful man. He said, okay, you guys, he calls on the internet, the island is supposed to be secured, but the end of the runway isn't. When we turn off, you guys start shooting in all directions. Because they're Japanese troops hiding in the sugarcane fields and
taking pot shots of the planes as they took off.
Oh yeah, everything. In fact, they raided a barracks, well, a tent, right down at the airfield and killed 9 P-51 pilots.
Wow. And
that was war, you know.
Sure
that was war.
Now, B-29, 11-man crew, is that correct?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And your duty during that time?
CFC, which is Central Fire Control Gunner. The B-29 was a pressurized airplane, very comfortable airplane, with the world's worst engines in it.
Oh, yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, you've been an engine guy. It's a horror story.
Yeah.
We lost more. Well, when we had all 4 engines on one airplane in our squadron, got 100 hours. General LeMay came down and gave a medal to all the mechanics.
Wow. I understood that about 75 hours was about max on those. The
if
original
you made
engines.
It. Sometimes you take it up to check out a new engine, and that would fail.
Oh.
And
we have a documentary, and we're going to get back to the story, especially when we talk about the engine failures, because that was critical to the lifeblood. The 11 people
really?
That were on that plane.
Absolutely.
You had to cross your fingers.
If it coughed, you know, you might as well bend over and kiss your elbow goodbye. All right, clean that up.
But this is a documentary the armed forces put together, and we're going to take a look at this. And it's really the life of Captain Ernie Stadvec during that period of time in our history, World War II. And let's take a look at this Armed Forces documentary right now, and we'll see a little bit. Maybe even you might even be in a film. We don't know.
My goodness! Well, my spot on the airplane was the top booster. That's a Central Fire Control Gunner, and all the guns were electronically controlled.
Remote control.
Remote controlled. Yeah, you had a gun sight, but not like sitting in a turret on the B-17, B-24. So It was a comfortable airplane. The engines were lousy.
Let's take a look at that. We're going to come back.
Good. That'll be interesting.
A few minutes, we'll come back, and I want to talk about those engines and, well, less of Handy Randy, more of Ernie and the planes. Watch.
Early in 1945, our B-29s began full-scale operations against Japan. 1,500 miles to targets, and 1,500 miles back, from bases at Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. Here, 21st Bomber Command concentrated its massive air power and planned the ultimate crushing defeat of Japan, down to the last bomb. Here was the beginning of the end of the road to Tokyo. After 6 months of reoccupation, there were few signs of war along the quiet summer shores of Guam. The liberated Chamorros were back in their clean native villages, American citizens again, smiling and friendly, unaware that a miracle had happened around them. A miracle that moved mountains of material, equipment, and supplies across the Pacific, that changed their dirt roads into broad highways, that manicured their jungles into acres of blacktop airfields. And nearby, new communities of American citizens had set up housekeeping with various types of self-service. The latest labor-saving devices, few laundry problems, and no modern inconveniences. By midsummer, 21st Bomber Command was in business. Big business. Under General LeMay's direction, the long arm of Bomber Command began punching the enemy with appalling power. From Guam, Tinian, and Saipan, 600 plane missions increased the bombing weight 100% in 2 months. Behind this expanding power was planning. The LeMay plan began on the ground, with maintenance. Assembly line technique cut engine change time from 3 days to less than half a day. In shops and hard stands, ground crews worked day and night during the blitz weeks to keep more B-29s on the line. By July, LeMay's Bomber Command is an efficient, well-oiled, well-drilled machine of destruction. Here's a vital cog of that machine. 11 men and a bomber. While they wind up for action, let's find out where they're going, and some of the things they're going to do, and why, and with what. How do they set up the longest, toughest bomber mission in history? It began about 12 hours ago in the war room at Guam, with General LeMay and his staff receiving a report on tomorrow's weather in Japan. Tomorrow's forecast is typical.
Nagoya, 8/10 cloud of 10,000 feet. In the east, Tokyo area will be 6/10 at 22,000, 3/10 at 14,000 feet, closing up solid after 11 a.m. Osaka and everything west is reported completely socked in.
How will the general solve that one? His B-29s are up against a blank wall except for a possible opening around Tokyo. The old man considers every vital factor and makes his decision. 4 wings will strike Tokyo at 10 o'clock. They'll go in under that weather and bomb at 12,000. Now it's a question of target selection. First priority in the Tokyo area is number 573. Intelligence informs the general that 573 is already 3/4 destroyed. At the moment, number 574, still untouched, would seem more important. Operations checks the tactical plan for 574. General LeMay orders the required changes, okays the target, and commits all executive details to his staff. Operations, with his deputy chief of staff and project officer, goes to work setting up the changes. In that plans folder is a mountain of preparation by special sections of intelligence and operations. 1,000 hours of research. Collated facts and figures have been distilled into Tactical Plan 574.
Aircraft will assemble as briefed with 3 groups of P-51s for escort. Smoke markers at 1-minute intervals will be dropped by lead planes to expedite departure from assembly point. 1 squadron each wing will carry M47 incendiary clusters. Balance of squadrons, 500 and 1,000-pound GP bombs fused a quarter-second nose and tail. Altitude of attack, 12,000 feet. Planes of 314th Wing will carry capacity fuel loads of approximately 7,300 gallons per plane. Calibrated airspeed of 210 miles per hour will be flown by all aircraft on bombing run. Radar landfall 3450 north and 140 east will be the same for all planes to afford a good land-water contrast checkpoint. The Navy is requested to furnish the following facilities for air-sea rescue purposes. 3 surface vessels to proceed to positions X. 4 submarines assigned to lifeguard duties at positions Y. 2 Dumbos to orbit at station Z. 4 B-29s will orbit as super Dumbos at the following positions.
Each section of the plan is double-checked. To supervise certain aspects of planning, Lieutenant Colonel Catton, a former lead crew pilot, was recently brought over to staff as project officer. This officer's extensive combat experience now helps to iron out operational kinks. He will accompany this mission to observe new smoke signals at assembly point. A field order is now dispatched to the wings. Takeoff time is flashed to the controller, who coordinates the vast network of communications gathered here at the heart and nerve center of command. Here in the control room, status panels and a mission board are maintained to show at a glance the countless up-to-the-minute details of all daily operations. Prior to takeoff, each mission is set up aboard to afford a visual progress of the flight, from takeoff to target and return. Colored yarns, one for each wing, are laid out to indicate the flight lines, which pass close to Iwo Jima, the halfway point. Proceed as specified in the field order to the proper target. Other symbols are used to mark air-sea rescue positions. A timetable of statistics for each wing as planned and flown is recorded from hourly reports on the status panel, beginning with takeoff time. Another day's work. One more 1,500-mile haul up and down the ruddy Pacific. 15 hours, 7,000 gallons, 4 engines, 11 guys. Knock wood. A water jump across 20 degrees of the globe. A continent of ocean. Destination, Tokyo. It's like taking off in Mexico for targets in Canada. The 314th is airborne. 145 planes, 1 minute apart, 67 tons each. B-29 takeoffs are a tough sweat. That first long moment is the worst. Some swear it takes luck, like a wife's stocking, to beat it. At Tinian, 100 miles north, 2 more B-29 wings prepare for takeoff. 134 aircraft from the 58th wing. 100 more from the 313th wing. At Saipan, a few minutes later, the veteran 73rd Wing lines up for takeoff. 153 more bombers are added to the mission striking force.
Our friend Ernie Stadvec, one of the heroes that were part of that 11-man crew that flew the B-29, and we're taking this opportunity, inviting you onto the Handy Randy supposedly auto care show, and we're getting away from that. We're talking about aviation because you are, as far as I'm concerned, the expert in our area when it comes to aviation because your background, 16 years old is when you got started at it.
14. 75 years, you know, and that 75 years I wasn't killed one time.
I would do that. Okay. I didn't know a lot about you, but I knew that.
Okay, you knew that, huh? Okay.
And we were talking earlier to Mr. Lyons, the instructor here at the school, that he had an associate that came across some old video from WAKC television here in Akron. That was back in '68, I think they came across some video. When you were on television in Akron, in the beginning of television.
Thanks, Randy.
Oh man, I'm sorry.
Wow.
But so was I.
Oh, I know, so were you, yeah, because I've stated you're the oldest guy, 85 years in TV with this guy. Yeah, it was called Captain Ernie's Flying Club. It was a kid show. And the old WAKR studios up on Copley Road. And the manager, we taught him to fly and then got into it and he wanted to do some kind of show. Okay, Captain Ernie's Flying Club. And they had about a 300 or 400 seat auditorium up there, as I remember. And we used to pack that place. Kids would come in and I'd have the Blue Angels on, I'd have the Thunderbirds, the Golden Knights, anybody with aviation.
Big kids and little kids.
I even had an airplane in the studio.
Beautiful.
And it was a Cessna 120, which I later sold to the manager of the station rather than haul it out again to the airport. But anyway, Roger Burke, who was the owner of the station, finally, when I got rid of the air, sold it to his manager, he says, I knew why you had that airplane in here all winter. You got free hangar rent.
Right.
So he figured it out.
Mr. Lyons had somebody that worked for the station, recovered some video. We're going to see if we can find that person, and hopefully we can find some video. Or anyone out there in TV land that may or may not have attended one of your shows, that maybe had the old cameras running at that time. Boy, wouldn't it be neat
It's
to
all
have some
live,
video of
yeah,
that?
yeah. The only
All
problem is the statute of limitations run.
Oh. I don't-
Okay, maybe
If we find it,
good.
you have to promise me that you won't sue me if I use it.
Well, I can't promise that because, you know, no, I will.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
okay.
Well, we're looking for that. Anybody that might have some of the old
Okay.
Captain Ernie's TV show. But he's back on television today with Handy Randy. And again, we are in the Wayback Machine again, and we're going all the way back to 1944, 1945, the South Pacific, flying those dangerous missions to Japan from Tinian and back. Mm-hmm. Wasn't a walk in the park.
Well, no, we flew. Okay. We carried, I always got a kick out of the media, what they described the B-29. Did 320 miles an hour and carried 20,000 pounds of bombs and all that. That was straight down at full power. Because there's no way you could carry 20,000 pounds of bomb and make it from Tinian Island or Saipan or Guam to Japan and back. It's 1,500 miles, or 3,000 miles, and the 1,500 one way. So that was a need for capturing Iwo Jima, for a base for 17,000 Marines and wounded and killed. But anyway, we used to make it to Japan. We had 2 Bombay tanks, fuel tanks in the 880 gallons, and then we could only carry 4,000 pounds of bombs. When that airplane was loaded with 750 rounds of ammunition per gun, everybody wearing a flak suit, you know, and sitting on one just in case, and helmets and everything, and huge computers were mechanical. And they were about so big, and I know how big they were because I had to lift them out every so often. And that wide, and they're heavy. And so you could cruise 160 miles an hour to maintain fuel consumption.
I see.
And no formation flying. Because formation flying always meant jockeying the throttles, and of course you burn up more fuel. The 29th Force lost more engines, not engines, lost a lot of engines, but more airplanes on running out of fuel. And ditching in the ocean was precarious. Because that big airplane, I think probably in your clip here, you'll show a ditching. The airplane would break up right away. Well, you know, you had a tough time getting out of that thing. But and the engines were terrible. They would burn off the last two cylinders. They did not figure out, Curtiss Wright was really remiss in that. They refused to move the engine design and construction to Washington, where Boeing was located, in Kansas, where they could work together on it. And that's in a book called Mission to Tokyo. That the political thing, because the congressmen and senators didn't want to move that over to another state.
Because it could lose jobs in their state.
Yeah, well, who wanted to lose jobs in the state? Because anybody could walk and get a job during the war.
That's a shame.
But that is in the book called Mission to Tokyo.
And I had just recently read that there was complete cooperation when the P-51 was designed with the new design engine. That there was between the British and the United States complete cooperation on fitting that P-51 with the updated engine.
Yeah, well, the P-51 came out with an Allison engine, which was not very
Didn't work
good.
very well.
And so they put the British engine in there.
And that worked perfectly.
That was in the Spitfire.
Right.
And that did it. That did it right there.
Cooperation where we didn't have here at States.
Well, you know your engines, young fellow.
You know, another thing is you had mentioned trying to get better gas mileage, and at the end they went with a direct fuel injection over the carbureted engine that they had originally in the.
Well, we had pressure carburetors in, and that later on Curtiss Wright puts an R3350 turbo compound engine, and then they were just terrible. And later on, they improved them to put them in the Constellation, the airliners, and also in the long-range airplanes.
They finally got it figured out.
They finally got it years later.
Now, one other question, and that is being around these engines, the early engines, they used a lot of magnesium because it was lightweight metal. Mm-hmm. There was an issue with magnesium, however.
Oh yeah, the issue was fire. When it burned, it burned. It would the only way it would extinguish, it had to do it itself, burn itself right.
There wasn't anything you could
nothing you could put on magnesium.
Water would just
amplify
the problem.
Yeah. Well, the first airplane on our first mission, an airplane Juke Girl, turned on, started down the runway. The guy evidently experienced something because you could see the engines come down. He probably pulled the throttles, and then you could see him, the airplane go like this, then he decided he couldn't stop. So he rammed the throttles forward went off the end of the runway, didn't make it, hit a mound of dirt. I remember this because we're waiting to go. And the airplane hit this mound of dirt, broke in half, a spiral of smoke, and then it blew up in a tremendous explosion. All of them carried, probably about 8,000 gallons of fuel, and that went up with the bombs.
Oh.
And it shook everything. Even some airplanes parked, the skin was wrinkled on them.
When we get back from watching some more of this documentary, we want to talk a little bit about, again, the armament and some other issues when it came to that B-29, that plane that was used, the ship that was used to conquer Japan. Watch.
last B-29 is airborne at 1540. The tower at Saipan relays this information to the controller back at Guam. First and last takeoff times of each wing are recorded here and go to make up the first of a series of tabulated mission reports. Copies of these reports are dispatched to headquarters, Washington, and posted on the control room report board. During that first hour, the B-29s have settled down for the big grind, saving precious gas, cruising 1,000 feet off the water. Ability, experience, confidence ride in each plane. A plan of action for 11 men trained and tested to function as one. The navigator sets the course, logging island checkpoints as they climb past the Northern Marianas. Pagan, Assumption, Morgue, the Pohores. After about 4 hours of flight, the bombers pass close to Iwo Jima, the hot rock, a black, gritty pork chop halfway to Honshu. 8 square miles bought and paid for by our Marines. We made some quick changes, cutting away that sulfurous volcanic crust and rolling Iwo's surface into one enormous flat top. 3 big airstrips now launch our P-51s for bomber escort over Japan. General Moore and his staff of 7th Fighter Command run the show and direct all air-sea rescue operations in close collaboration with Bomber Command. A last-minute briefing check, just to make sure today's fighter escort knows all air-sea rescue positions. Out on the line, General Moore's P-51s are warming up for the longest fighter flight on record. Seven hours on one engine, extra belly tanks, extra nerve and stamina in the cockpit. About the time our bomber wings are passing Iwo Jima, the pea shooters are taking off, scheduled to join them 3.5 hours later off the shores of Japan. After a rendezvous at Kita, the P-51s head for assembly point, led by B-29s designated as navigator ships. Farther west, our bomber wings grind ahead on the last lap to the Empire. Reports to the controller back at Guam give their flight position, which is kept up to the hour on the mission board. Still at low altitude, the B-29s are approaching the bad weather belt, where unreported storms and cold fronts appear suddenly across the bomber course.
Pilot to crew. We're going to start our climb. Check oxygen equipment. Tell Buck he'd better get out to his doghouse.
As they begin their slow climb to altitude, the crews prepare for the vital business ahead. And from now on till they come off target and head home, it's all business. The central fire control system is warmed up. Superhuman brain power at the flick of a switch. Each gunner flexes his sights and tries the coordinated fire controls with a few short bursts to clear the gun. After pushing up to altitude, the bombers arrive close to assembly point. Air in the pressurized cabin is comparable to 8,000 feet, but oxygen masks are adjusted and ready for instant use. From the southeast, a fighter escort appears with its navigator ships, which now turn off to wait for the fighters' return at rally point. The Mustangs climb in formation to take positions above the boxes of B-29s. Lead bombers begin to circle, dropping the new smoke markers for assembly. The project officer observes this part of the tactical plan in action. From various zone positions, the groups separate and form on their lead ships in 9 or 11 plane waves. which head for initial point. The big parade is on. Landfall is picked up, along with the first black burst from enemy coastal batteries. Fujiyama, the familiar white beacon, marks the turn for initial point. Black becomes heavier and more accurate. And now the first Jap snoopers appear, diving head-on into the formations. Some are suicide fighters trying to ram off bombers. Other jet fighters drop phosphorus bombs, set to explode in front of the oncoming B-29s. Our B-51s go out after them, and know they're tangling with experts. The B-51's job is to protect the B-29s. But some of those Jap fighters filter through and meet the blast of bomber guns. Tail gunner pleads with a nip fighter to come in a little closer. Turn at initial point, the tight bomber waves move steadily on. And get ready for
talking to our World War II hero, Ernie Stadvec, about the adventures of flying the B-29 from Tinian Island, Long Skinny Island, where you had a very long runway.
We had two airfields there, and they were 8,800 feet, and cliffs, 200-foot cliffs on each side of the runway, at the approach end, at the back end. And when the overhead airplanes would go off, they'd fly off and disappear. And then they'd gain flying speed, and with the pushing of the weight of the aircraft and all, would hold them above the water. Unless they lost an engine, then there's nothing to go. But then they would gradually climb out again. You'd breathe a sigh of relief. But some 29s actually, the propellers hit the water.
Wow!
They still could recover.
And because of the issues on the engines overheating, a number of issues. The cowling was wrong. The magnesium would heat up. There's so many issues with that. The pilots were anxious to gain airspeed, so the engines would have ample cooling.
Well, they were anxious, but they couldn't. You had to go strictly by the numbers. And that's when you yank back. When you got to the V1 and V2 speeds. V1 is when you can stop. You have enough runway to stop. V2 is you're committed to go. You can't stop.
Like you said, kiss your hind end.
Well, okay, you said it, not me. Okay.
if you didn't, okay.
Yeah.
So now we talked about armament. The planes were just weighted down with crew, with cannon or machine gun rounds, and then you had these unusual. Now we always talked about Vietnam and the napalm and the devastation that the napalm did on the VC and the Vietnam Army. The bombs at the B-29s were pretty deadly and devastating as well,
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
much like napalm.
Well, the magnesium bombs, because the idea, the theory was you burn down, everything built in Tokyo was wood and paper. So dropping a match on it would have set the configuration off. And
And there's no putting magnesium out, as we mentioned before.
yeah.
So it's going to burn, no
Oh,
matter what the
there's
fire
no-
department would do.
Yeah. In fact, one guy in one of the squadrons received the Medal of Honor, and he died here about 2 years ago. But he was the flight engineer on B-29. Flight engineer had two pilots. The airplane had two pilots and the flight engineer. And he was. They had what they called a Pathfinder airplane that was painted black underneath. Got that from the British. The Pathfinder would go over and drop his incendiary bombs and light a path because nobody could find formation, could you say? And then one after another, as they came up on Tokyo, they'd follow that path and then drop their bombs. And the guy in that lead airplane had to drop a magnesium flare because they would burn for a long time through a chute. Well, he dropped this one, and the door down below malfunctioned, and the thing came back up into the airplane. And this guy grabbed this magnesium bomb with his hands, and he tried to throw it out, but couldn't get anything open. Finally, they yanked one of the storm windows, pilot storm windows open. He was carrying this thing in his hands, and he threw it out the window, and he saved the crew.
But it
And,
cost him his hands, probably.
Well, yeah, I don't know if he lost his hand, but he was burned so bad that General LeMay came down to make sure he got the best care until they could fly him out of there. And he survived, just died 2 years
Incredible.
ago.
What a
Medal
hero.
of Honor, won the Medal of Honor. That's heroism
That
right
is
there.
quite-
That's the guy you call a hero.
Yeah,
The rest
well,
of us were shaking all the time.
You know, every one of you World War II veterans always say it was the other guy, or the guy that didn't come back were the real heroes. But in my opinion, you had, and don't tell me, everyone was terrified. He got back and kissed the earth again. He made it back.
Well, terrified only when the bolt came close.
Yeah.
Okay. The rest of the time, you're 18, 19, you're invincible.
I see.
And but when
what
they
they
start
said.
shooting, so why are they shooting at us? What war, you dummy? That's what,
You know, again, a little bit of history that I've read and watched. The fighter pilots, they knew that they were the best, and that was the attitude that those P-51 pilots had.
Oh,
is
absolutely.
they were the best, and they were going to. You didn't go into a dogfight with the idea that you're going to be defensive. You were on the offense all of the time.
all the time, even in a bar.
I bet that.
Fighter pilots they like Marines and paratroopers.
Ernie, again, I want to, on behalf of us in the audience here and our viewing audience here in Ohio, we want to again one more time offer our thanks to your service, to our community, and of course to our nation, and you and the heroes that were part of that task that won the war for us.
May I say one thing or make a request? Okay. Don't clap, just send money. Okay.
Captain Ernie Stadvec, you have shows on the internet, on YouTube.
Yeah.
How would we find those?
ErnieStV.com and get the menu and all. Hey, thanks for the plug.
And he's always doing stuff in the community. I was fortunate enough to pinch hit for you this summer when we did the antique boat show.
Oh,
at
right,
Portage Lake,
right,
which was
uh-huh.
a lot of fun. I hope we'll team up and do that together.
Oh,
this
my,
coming year.
that'd be a lot of fun. Hey, sitting down and talking is always fun. You know?
And let's go out with the balance of this documentary, and remember that people just like, and again, you take offense when I say this, but we have to find and salute these veterans because, like my father, like my uncle, they're gone. We're losing these guys, not only our World War II veterans, but our Korean veterans and our Vietnam veterans daily. I know.
You're full of good news.
I'm sorry. We'll make it up to you on the next show, I promise you. Captain Ernie Stadvec, the B-29 story. Watch.
But those clouds are beginning to close in, and it looks worse ahead. Then just east of Hachioji, the Tokyo area breaks clear. The bombardiers begin to draw a bead on 574. The planes sit tight for the bombing run. Here's where we pay off. Jap aircraft plants and an airdrome 12,000 feet below are about to receive 4,000 tons of destruction. The first ways the B-29s have already found their objective. Succeeding bomber groups add their devastation to the smoking targets. Tactical Plan 574 is now an accomplished fact. The bombers turn and go downwind, across the burnt acres of Tokyo. Close-up cameras show the scars of those spectacular fire strikes last March. 51 square miles of LeMay treatment. Across the bay, and a tailwind speeds them south, down the Chiba Peninsula. This is fighter country. With the first call on the intercom, our Mustangs peel off and go to work again. bombers homeward bound, our P-51s drop down for strafing runs, concentrating on definite objectives from here to the enemy coast. Skimming along at maximum speed, the fighters pair off and go to work cutting vital Jap lifelines, blasting away at communications, radio installations, power lines. Swooping down on enemy transportation, railroads, marshalling yards, small suburban factories. Airfield. On to shipping targets. Freighters, fishermen, trawlers, harbor and coastal craft. Destroyer or lugger, it's the same enemy. After strafing, our fighters climb back to rally point and the waiting B-29 navigator planes. With the first sight of Iwo, fuel gauges are down close to empty, but fighter spirits begin to rise. They wind up and finish with a kick, coming past Sunabachi at whiplash speed, and zoom into their victory rolls. Once over for each Jap kill. After the last fighter groups are in, all hands sweat in those first limping B-29s. That runway is a beautiful sight as they let down with engines out, low in gas, or beat up by flak and fighters. In 3 months, nearly 2,000 crippled or gas-shy B-29s havened at Iwo. You can understand why those 4 fanboys bless those Marines, and even name their planes after them. The lucky ones are fueled and depart for home bases in an hour. but Iwo still has its hazards. Weather can turn this station into a hopeless daymare. Fog and quick overcast often blacks out the airstrip during these crucial periods. That means orders to bail out. Or with luck, a B-29 might drop in for a copybook ditching. From here you can see how the cloud cover up there smothers the runway, and realize what one pilot went through. Sometimes a battle-scarred bomber staggers back to Iwo, only to flatten out at the last heartbreaking second. Some miracle, the whole crew got away from their stations to safety before 2,000 gallons of flaming gas enveloped them. Firefighters risked their lives to save the ship. This, too, takes courage beyond the line of duty. Far to the south, most of the wings are nearing their bases. Exhausted crews wait out the last endless hour, when time seems to stop. Their position is radioed in, and the controller gets word of the approaching flight. At last, the familiar Arianas appear on the horizon. The bombers fly across Guam and turn into the landing pad. 15 hours ago, they left the other end of that runway. It's a pleasure to be back. A pleasure to roll on solid, familiar blacktop. Good to feel the sudden humid heat, to be among the living, swapping details with the ground crew. Flak, fighters, the close call, the one that got away.